Have you ever had that strange feeling that someone was standing behind you, even when you knew you were completely alone? Maybe you've ignored it, maybe you've laughed it off, or maybe you looked behind you anyway. Tonight's stories are entirely fictional, created for entertainment. But once they begin, you may find yourself glancing over your shoulder more often than you'd like. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, lock your door if it makes you feel safer, and remember, sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what you see, it's what you almost don't. Let's begin. Rain hammered against the empty road as Daniel shoved his hands deeper into the pockets of his hoodie. It was 11:48 p.m. His shift at the university library had ended late again, and he had just missed the final bus. Normally, his roommate picked him up. Tonight, every call went straight to voicemail. The nearest taxi was almost 40 minutes away, so Daniel waited. The old bus stop sat beside a deserted forest road on the outskirts of town. One flickering streetlight buzzed overhead. The glass walls were covered with years of scratches and faded graffiti. Beyond them stretched nothing but black trees. No houses, no traffic, only darkness. The rain slowly eased. Silence replaced it. Daniel checked his phone. 2% battery, no signal. He sighed. This night couldn't get any worse. A loud metallic creak echoed nearby. He looked up. The empty swing at the abandoned playground across the road moved gently by itself. Back and forth. Back and forth. There wasn't even any wind. Daniel frowned. Probably nothing. He looked away. 5 minutes later, someone sat at the opposite end of the bus stop. Daniel froze. He hadn't heard footsteps. No approaching car. No bicycle. Nothing. The stranger wore a long black coat. Their hood covered their face. Hands rested perfectly still in their lap. They didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't look around. Daniel forced himself to relax. Okay. Someone else is waiting. He pulled out his phone again. 1%. He opened a game to distract himself. When he looked up, the stranger seemed closer. Not much. Maybe one seat. Daniel blinked. Had they moved while he looked down? He wasn't sure. He hadn't heard anything. The silence had become strangely heavy. Even the insects had stopped making noise. Daniel glanced toward the road. Still empty. He looked back. The stranger hadn't changed position. Or had they? He couldn't tell anymore. A sudden vibration startled him. His phone displayed one new notification. Unknown number. The message contained only 4 words. Don't look behind you. Daniel stared. What kind of joke is this? He immediately turned around. Nothing. Only wet pavement disappearing into darkness. He laughed nervously. Someone's messing with me. He tried calling the number. No connection. Battery 1%. The screen went black. Dead. Now the only light came from the flickering street lamp overhead. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Each flash left the world dark for a split second. During one of those brief moments, Daniel thought he heard footsteps. Soft, slow. Splash, splash, splash. He looked toward the road. Nobody. Another flash. The stranger was sitting perfectly still again. Daniel rubbed his eyes. His imagination was getting carried away. Then he noticed something strange. A puddle beneath the stranger reflected. Nothing. The streetlight reflected. The bench reflected. The trees reflected. But where the stranger should have appeared, the puddle showed empty space. Daniel swallowed hard. He crouched slightly. Maybe it was the angle. He moved left. The reflection never changed. The bench looked empty. Yet the stranger remained right there, watching. Daniel's heart began pounding. He stood quickly. I think I'll just walk. The nearest petrol station was almost 3 kilometers away. Still better than staying here. He stepped out of the shelter. Behind him, splash. He spun around. The stranger remained seated. Impossible. He had clearly heard footsteps. Daniel walked faster. The bus stop slowly disappeared behind him. Streetlights became fewer. The forest seemed to close in around the road. Every few seconds, splash, splash, splash. Someone walked behind him, always matching his pace. Whenever Daniel stopped, the footsteps stopped too. He refused to turn around. His breathing became quicker. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's nothing. Then, a whisper. Very close. So close. Daniel ran. His trainers pounded against the wet asphalt. The footsteps exploded into a sprint behind him. Closer, closer, closer. He dared one glance over his shoulder. Nobody. The road was empty, yet the footsteps never stopped. He sprinted until he reached another streetlight. Panting heavily, he leaned against the pole. Silence. The footsteps vanished. Daniel laughed from pure relief. "I'm losing my mind." Then he noticed something. His shadow stretched across the road beneath the streetlight, but beside it, another shadow. Standing directly behind him, he slowly looked down. His own shadow moved. The second one didn't. Daniel's blood ran cold. He turned around. Nothing. The road was empty. He looked down again. Only one shadow remained. A bus approached in the distance. Headlights. Finally, Daniel waved frantically. The bus stopped. The elderly driver frowned. "You all right, son?" Daniel climbed aboard without answering. He collapsed into the first seat. The driver looked puzzled. "Were you talking to someone back there?" "What?" "You kept looking behind you." Daniel forced a weak smile. "No." The driver shrugged. "Strange. I thought there was another person standing beside you." Daniel slowly turned toward the rear window. The empty road disappeared into darkness. No one followed. No movement. Nothing. He finally relaxed. 20 minutes later, he reached home. His roommate stared at him. "Dude, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Daniel laughed nervously. "I almost convinced myself someone was following me." His roommate didn't laugh. Instead, he slowly opened his laptop. "I was checking traffic cameras earlier. You should probably see this." The security footage from the bus stop appeared. Timestamp: 11:53 p.m. Daniel sat alone beneath the shelter. Completely alone. There was no stranger, no second person, no black coat. Nothing. The footage continued. Daniel repeatedly looked toward the empty bench, as though someone sat there. Then, he suddenly stood, walked away, stopped, turned around, and began talking. To thin air. Daniel stared silently. I wasn't alone." The roommate rewound the video. Frame by frame, everything remained empty, until the final second. Just before Daniel left the bus stop, one frame changed. A tall black silhouette stood directly behind him. Not beside him, not in front of him. Behind him. Its glowing white eyes faced the camera. Then the recording ended. Daniel slowly closed the laptop. Neither of them spoke another word. That night, every time he walked through his apartment, he couldn't stop feeling it. Someone was standing just behind him. Rain tapped softly against the taxi window as Ethan stared at the old apartment building. Its faded brick walls disappeared into the fog, and several windows were completely dark despite it only being 8 in the evening. The sign above the entrance simply read, Hawthorne Apartments. The rent was unbelievably cheap. Too cheap. When Ethan had asked the landlord why, the man had smiled awkwardly. Old building. Nothing more. After months of struggling to pay bills, Ethan wasn't in a position to ask more questions. He grabbed his bags and walked inside. The lobby smelled of damp wood and old paint. A grandfather clock stood silently in the corner. It had no hands. The elevator groaned as it climbed to the 4th floor. When the doors opened, the hallway stretched endlessly beneath flickering fluorescent lights. Apartment numbers lined both sides. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, then 17, his new home. The apartment itself was surprisingly clean. Fresh paint, new furniture, large windows overlooking the city. For the first time in weeks, Ethan smiled. Maybe things were finally turning around. At exactly 3:17 a.m., knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks echoed from the front door. Ethan opened his eyes. He glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. Half asleep, he walked to the peephole. Nobody. He unlocked the door anyway. The hallway was empty. Silent. Not even the elevator hummed. He shrugged and went back to bed. The next night, the same thing happened. 3:17 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. Again, no one was there. By the 4th night, he stopped opening the door. Instead, he checked the hallway through the peephole. Nothing. Yet the knocking continued, every single night. Always exactly 3 knocks. Always exactly 3:17 a.m. Never early, never late. A few days later, Ethan met an elderly woman watering plants outside apartment 19. You just moved into 17? He nodded. She immediately looked uncomfortable. You should leave. Ethan laughed. Why? She didn't answer. Instead, she quietly returned inside and locked her door. Later that evening, he asked another resident. The man froze, then whispered, "Don't answer anyone knocking after 3." Before Ethan could ask another question, The neighbor hurried away. 1 week later, something changed. The knocking stopped. For one night, Ethan thought whatever prank had been happening was finally over. Then he heard it. A whisper, very faint, coming from inside his bedroom wall. He pressed his ear against it. At first, he couldn't understand the words. Then they became clearer. "Don't turn around." His heart skipped. The voice sounded terrified, not threatening, almost like someone warning him. He backed away. The whisper immediately stopped. The next morning, Ethan noticed something strange. A framed photo of his parents sat on the kitchen shelf. Except, he had never unpacked it. He walked closer. His hands trembled. The picture wasn't from his childhood. It showed him standing in this apartment, looking out the living room window. Someone else stood behind him, blurred, watching. He ripped the photograph from its frame. On the back, written in faded black ink. Unable to ignore everything any longer, Ethan contacted building maintenance. An old janitor arrived carrying a rusty toolbox. After hearing Ethan's story, the man's face turned pale. Instead of laughing, he quietly moved Ethan's wardrobe away from the bedroom wall. Hidden behind it was a narrow metal door, covered with decades of paint. "I thought they sealed this," the janitor whispered. The door opened with a long metallic screech. Beyond it stretched a narrow maintenance corridor. Dust covered the floor. Old electrical cables hung from the ceiling. The air smelled stale. No one had entered in years. At least, that's what Ethan thought. Until he noticed footprints. Fresh footprints, leading deeper inside. Using his phone's flashlight, Ethan followed them. The corridor ran behind every apartment on the floor. Tiny ventilation openings allowed him to see into people's homes. Families watching television, someone cooking dinner, children doing homework. None of them realized someone could watch from inside the walls. Then, he reached the space behind apartment 17. His apartment. There, sat an old wooden chair, facing directly toward a vent overlooking his bedroom. Beside it, empty food wrappers, water bottles, a sleeping bag. Someone had been living inside the walls, watching him. For weeks, maybe longer. His pulse raced. He stepped backwards. Crunch. He had stood on something. Looking down, he found dozens of photographs scattered across the dusty floor. Every single one showed him. Sleeping, cooking, watching television, even brushing his teeth. A sudden sound echoed through the corridor. Footsteps. Slow, dragging. Coming from deeper inside the darkness. Ethan grabbed the photographs and ran. The footsteps became faster. Closer. Metal pipes vibrated as something chased him through the narrow passage. His flashlight flickered. He reached the hidden door. Slammed it shut. Locked it. Silence. He leaned against it, breathing hard. Then, 3 knocks. From the other side. Knock, knock, knock. Exactly 3. Ethan packed immediately. He refused to spend another night there. As he zipped his suitcase, he accidentally glanced into the bathroom mirror. His blood froze. Someone stood directly behind him. Tall, thin, head tilted unnaturally. Its face remained hidden in darkness. Ethan spun around. Nothing. He looked back at the mirror. The figure remained, standing perfectly still, watching him. He smashed the mirror with a hairdryer. The reflection disappeared. Within an hour, Ethan moved into a hotel across town. He never returned to apartment 17. Weeks passed. Gradually, he convinced himself someone had secretly lived inside the walls. Nothing supernatural, just a disturbed stalker. Eventually, he relaxed. Until one rainy afternoon, a parcel arrived at his hotel, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Ethan, sleeping peacefully in his hotel room. The picture had clearly been taken the previous night. On the back, the same handwriting. "You looked behind you. I never stopped." Ethan's hands shook violently. He slowly turned the photograph over again. Something caught his eye. Reflected in the hotel room mirror, behind the bed, stood the same impossibly tall figure, watching him sleep. He looked up from the photograph, very slowly, toward the mirror across his room. At first, there was nothing. Then, a pair of pale white eyes blinked. Just for a second, the hotel lights went out, and somewhere in the darkness, 3 slow knocks echoed from the door. Knock, knock, knock. The station was almost empty. A cold wind swept across the platform, carrying scraps of newspaper and the distant rumble of thunder. Alex adjusted the strap of his backpack and checked the departure board. 11:58 p.m., North Line, on time. Only 3 people waited on the platform. An elderly man reading a newspaper, a woman wearing headphones, and a tall man dressed in a long black coat standing perfectly still near the edge of the platform. Alex barely noticed him. He was exhausted after working a double shift and only wanted to get home. Moments later, the train arrived with a metallic screech. The doors slid open. Alex stepped inside. The carriage was strangely empty. Dozens of seats, only one passenger. The same man in the black coat. He sat at the far end, facing Alex. He wasn't using a phone. He wasn't reading. He wasn't even blinking. His eyes remained fixed on Alex. Alex looked away. Just another weirdo. He sat near the middle of the carriage and put on his headphones. Outside, the city lights slowly faded into darkness. The train picked up speed. A robotic announcement echoed through the carriage. "Next stop, Ashbrook." The train slowed. The doors opened. Nobody got on, nobody got off. When the train started moving again, Alex glanced toward the far end. The man had moved. Now he was sitting 3 rows closer. Alex frowned. He hadn't heard footsteps. Maybe he simply hadn't been paying attention. He shrugged. Alex pulled out his phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual in rural areas. He opened a messaging app anyway. Every conversation had disappeared. Only one new message remained. From an unknown sender. "Don't fall asleep." Alex looked around. Nobody else seemed to notice. He tried deleting the message. It wouldn't disappear. The screen suddenly went black. His battery was still 80%. The phone refused to turn back on. Another announcement echoed overhead. But this time, the station name made no sense. Next stop, Hollow End. Alex had traveled this route dozens of times. There was no Hollow End. The train stopped anyway. Outside, no platform, only dense fog, old rusted lampposts, and an empty wooden bench. The doors opened. No one entered. No one left. The doors closed. The journey continued. Alex finally looked toward the far end again. The man was closer. Only 5 rows away now. His hands remained folded. His expression never changed. His eyes never left Alex. A chill crawled up Alex's spine. He stood and walked into the next carriage. It was empty. Completely empty. He sat near the front, trying to calm himself. Minutes later, a door slid open behind him. Alex slowly turned. The same man entered, walking silently. He sat 4 rows behind Alex, without making a sound. Unable to ignore it any longer, Alex hurried into the next carriage and found the conductor checking tickets. "Excuse me, there's someone following me." The conductor smiled politely. "Sir, you're the only passenger on this train." Alex laughed nervously. "No." The man in the black coat. The conductor's smile slowly disappeared. He looked confused. "I've checked every carriage." "You're alone," Alex insisted. The conductor agreed to walk back with him. They entered the carriage. Empty. The man had vanished. "There," Alex pointed. "He was sitting right there." The conductor shook his head. "I think you're very tired." Then he quietly walked away. Alex remained standing. The train entered a long tunnel. The windows became mirrors. As he looked at his own reflection, something appeared behind him. The man, standing directly over his shoulder. Alex spun around. Nothing. He looked back at the window. The reflection remained. The figure leaned closer. Its mouth slowly stretched into an impossible smile. Then the train emerged from the tunnel. The reflection disappeared. The train began slowing once more. The announcement crackled. Its voice sounded distorted, almost human. "Final stop. Turn around." The lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Darkness. When the lights returned, every seat around Alex was empty, except one. The man now sat directly across from him, less than 2 feet away. For the first time, he spoke, in a voice that sounded like several people whispering together. "You looked." Alex couldn't breathe. The train lights went out again. When they came back, the seat was empty. The train finally stopped. The doors opened. Alex stumbled onto the platform. The station looked normal. Bright lights, security cameras, people walking. He turned around. The train was empty. No passengers, no conductor, nothing. Within seconds, the train pulled away, as though it had never carried anyone. Shaken, Alex reported the incident to station security. A guard agreed to review the second TV footage. The video showed Alex boarding the train. Alone. He sat by himself for the entire journey. He repeatedly stared at empty seats, sometimes speaking, sometimes moving to different carriages, but always alone. The guard smiled awkwardly. You must have imagined it. Alex nodded silently. Maybe he had. The guard rewound the footage one final time. Just before Alex stepped off the train, the image glitched, only for one frame. Behind Alex stood the tall man in the black coat. His glowing white eyes stared directly into the security camera. Then the recording returned to normal. The guard's smile vanished. Neither of them spoke. 3 nights, 3 places, 3 people who believed they were alone. Until they looked behind them. These stories are entirely fictional, but sometimes the imagination can leave us questioning the shadows around us. So tell me in the comments, which story disturbed you the most? The shadow at the bus stop, apartment 17, or the last passenger? If you enjoyed these original horror stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next nightmare. And before you leave, take one slow look over your shoulder, just to make sure no one is standing behind you.